What's good, y'all? Today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make your own coin purse with this step-by-step tutorial. These are great for carrying your headphones, your makeup, things like that. Believe it or not, they could even carry some coins. They're a lot of fun to make, and since they have the hook on the back, you can attach them to an existing bag, to a shoulder strap, or even to a belt loop on your pants. Most of the bags I make come with one of these attached to the shoulder strap, and I've had a lot of people asking for the pattern, so I figured it was finally time to get to it, get the pattern done, and get you guys a tutorial. The link to the pattern is below. Once you get it, it'll be emailed to you as a PDF that you can print off right at home. It comes with 5 different sizes, some extra notes that you'll need, and some chances to win some free things. Then this video will give you the extra information that you need, as well as a step-by-step tutorial to help you make this pattern come to life. I would say this pattern is fairly beginner friendly, but at the end of this video, I'll go over some ways that you can simplify things even more, and I'll show you some ways that you can use this pattern to create new ones. I hope you guys are as excited as I am. Make sure to like this video and subscribe, and comment any questions that you think of throughout the video. I'll do my best to answer all of them. Without further ado, let's get into it. All you're gonna need is the base fabric of your choice, the lining fabric of your choice, the pattern, 1/8 inch cording, a 1-inch swivel hook, heavyweight backing, then fusible webbing, glue, tape, and rivets are optional but recommended. You'll start by printing the pattern at 100% scale on 8.5 by 11 inch paper. Then you'll want to check this test square here to make sure it printed properly. You can start cutting out the pattern now, being as precise as possible. For all the rectangular pieces, I prefer to just pull the measurements from the pattern and cut them with a clear ruler on a cutting board, but you could cut them out using the pattern pieces as well. I'm going to be using the A3 pattern since it's in the middle in terms of size, so that way you guys can get a good reference. You can start cutting out your pieces now. Make sure to take your time and be really precise. You want as clean of cuts as possible. I also recommend marking the middles of all your pieces as you cut. I'm going to wait to cut out the 2 circle lining pieces, and I'll explain why shortly. This isn't required, but I'm also going to trim 1/8 of an inch off the length of the middle strip lining piece. I do this because the lining obviously sits on the inside, and the length of the inner curve is going to be slightly shorter than the length of the outer curve, so this helps keeps the lining tight, but again, this isn't required. Now that all the pieces are cut, we're ready to start some prep work. As you can see, the backing pieces are a bit smaller than their respective base pieces because we don't want to sew the backing into the seam, so I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch all the way around on the wrong side of both of the circle pieces, and I'll do the same for the middle strip. The backing should fit perfectly in this area. Then I can go ahead and fuse the backing on, making sure it stays lined up as I go. Now the backing is on our 3 base pieces and we're ready to move on. I'm going to prep the zipper now. You'll need to use a number 10 zipper so that the width matches with the middle strip piece. So if you use a different size zipper, you'll need to adjust the width of the pattern. I'm also going to set up my own zipper. I buy zipper tape by the yard, then add on my own zipper pulls and stops. Since the zippers are kind of weird lengths, this is somewhat required. So if you don't know how to set up your own zipper, I have a tutorial that I'll link below. Regardless, the front page of the pattern tells you how long the zipper needs to be from one zipper stop to the other, as well as the total length of the zipper, since you need between 1/4 of an inch and 5/16 of an inch of zipper tape past each stop for your seam allowance. I'm going to make the piping now. You'll need to cut 2 strips of fabric that are 1 inch wide and about 1 1/4 inch longer than the total length of the middle strip. Then you'll cut 2 pieces of 1/8 inch cording that are the same length. I'll go ahead and make the piping now. Then I'll cut little 1/8 inch slits across it, which is what allows it to curve around the circle. You'll need some sort of presser foot that can get right up next to the cord, because that's what's going to give you your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if you don't have one and can't get one, you'll need to skip this part. On the same note, if you use a different width of cord, you'll also need to adjust the width of fabric strip you cut so that you still have your 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to make the strap for the hook now. I'll start by marking a 1/2 inch from the edge on the wrong side on just one end. Then I'll spread some glue within that area and fold the edge to that line. Then, still still on the wrong side, I'll mark the middle, spread some glue across the entire back, and I'll fold one edge into that line and fold the other edge in so that they meet in the middle. When I put the hook on, I'm not going to be folding the raw edge all the way to the other end. I'm going to fold it to about a 1/4 inch before the edge, which means that my middle is going to be a 1/4 inch shorter of where the true middle will be. So I'll find where the hook will sit and I'll mark a 1/2 inch in each direction. Since the hook will sit in this area and I don't want to get glue on it, I'm only going to glue the outer 2 areas and not the middle. So I'll go ahead and glue those outer 2 areas, then I'll get the hook in place, press those 2 sides together, then let that glue dry. In the meantime, you can mark the middle of whichever circle piece you want to use as the back, then mark a 1/2 inch in each direction from that line. This is where your strap will be sewn down. Since every hook is a bit different, I didn't mark out where yours should go on the pattern. Instead, what I like to do is match this top loop of the hook up with the piping. So I'll hold my piping in place and mark where that hits. Then I'll line the hook up with that mark and I'll mark the bottom of the strap as well. Then I'll mark 1 3/8 of an inch up from that line, and this rectangle is the area where I'll glue. You can mark this on the strap too, so I'll mark 1 3/8 of an inch up from the bottom on the wrong side. I like to use contact cement for this to really hold it in place, but you could just use the regular fabric glue or tape as well. But I'm going to spread some glue within my rectangle I marked out on the circle piece, and I'll do the same on the strap. Once the glue is dried, I'll get my hook in place within my markings. I also like to mark out 1/8 of an inch around the edges of the strap, and I'll be using this as a sewing guide. I'm going to use a 1/8 inch presser foot as well so that I can get up close to the bottom of the hook. If you're using a domestic machine, you could just use the zipper foot. Now that everything is prepped, we're ready to get into the sewing, but before we do that, I have a few notes for you. First off, I'm going to be using a 3mm stitch length for all of the seams and a 4mm stitch length for all of the top stitching. Second, I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance for everything. And finally, I'm going to be using a Tex 90 bonded nylon thread. However, if you have a domestic machine and can't use this heavy of thread, it's completely fine. Just use what you can. It'll still turn out beautifully. I'll start by sewing my strap on. So I'll start at one corner and sew across, then I'll turn, sew up, pivot at the next corner, and continue this all the way around until I get back to where I started. I'm also going to add a couple rivets within this area. This isn't required. You also could just do an X stitch or something else to help make it more durable. This is where the fusible webbing comes into play. I mentioned I didn't cut the circle lining before. So what I do is I cut a piece of webbing and I use it to fuse the lining to both base pieces. Then I'll just cut around my circles after. So I'll go ahead and fuse the lining on, going around the edges to really seal it in. It looks something like this now, so I'm ready to add the piping. I'll start just a little bit before my middle mark on the bottom, and I'll start clipping the piping in place all the way around, making sure the edges are lined up. Once you get back to where you started, you can open the piping up and trim the cords so that the two ends meet, then trim a bit of the excess fabric, fold the raw edge in, then connect it with the other end of the cord so that there's no raw edge. I also like to try to get the folded edge to line up perfectly with the middle mark. You can go ahead and baste your piping on now, sewing all the way around. Go slow and make sure the edge stays lined up as you sew. The base pieces should look something like this, and now we're ready to move on to the middle strip. I'll start by matching the middle strip piece right sides together with one end of the zipper. Then I'll take my lining and match the right side to the wrong side of the zipper. This way, once it's all sewn in, I'll have a clean finish on both sides. So I'll sew this now with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'll repeat this process for the other side. Then once it's turned, it should look something like this, and now I can top stitch both seams. So I'll top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge on both sides. Then I'm going to baste the lining in place, so make sure it's lined up and sew all the way around 1/8 of an inch from the edge to hold the lining in place. And finally, just like I did for the piping, I'll cut little 1/8 inch slits all the way around on both sides to help this spread around the circle. It should look something like this now, and I'm ready to sew the panels on. I'm going to use the 4 middle marks on the circle as well as the 2 marks and 2 seams on the middle strip to line everything up. So I'll start by matching the top marks right sides together, and I'll clip everything in place all the way around, making sure all the marks line up. You can sew it on now. Remember, you'll need a presser foot that can get right up next to the piping cord. You won't be able to see the cord, but you'll be able to feel it, so go slow and make sure everything stays lined lined up, and make sure you keep your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once that's sewn on, we'll repeat that process for the other panel. So again, clipping it in place, making sure all the marks are lined up as you get it on, and once again, you'll sew it on. The second side is a bit trickier since things are a bit more structured now, but just go slow and you'll be good. Also, remember to leave the zipper open when you sew the second side so that you can flip it right side out. Once you've sewn both sides on, you'll want to add the binding tape to cover these raw seams. You can use store-bought binding tape or make your own. Either way, it needs to be 3/4 of an inch wide, so 3/8 on each side for the fold. So I'll start clipping the binding tape in place, making sure it's even on both sides, and I'll clip it in place all the way around and finish with a small overlap back where I started. You can sew the binding tape on now. You'll want to sew about 1/8 of an inch from the lower edge, and just make sure things stay lined up on both sides as you sew. Once you've done this for both sides, all that's left to do is turn the pocket right side out. If you used a heavyweight backing like I did, this can be a bit tedious and you may have to be a bit forceful, but as long as you stitched everything well, nothing is going to bust open, so don't worry about that. Just do what you got to do and get it flipped. Once it's turned, it'll still be a bit deformed, so you'll want to go around and work the seams to make sure they're facing the right way and that everything is fully pushed out. You honestly should spend at least 5 to 10 minutes just shaping the pocket. Once you finish shaping it, the coin purse is done. I am super happy with how it came out. I think it has some really beautiful details and it was a great way to use some upcycled materials. I'm gonna add it to this backpack that I'm selling. I think it's gonna be a really great add-on for some extra functionality, extra storage, and it's just a nice little extra detail too. Before you go, I'm gonna teach you a couple quick things that may help you with making this coin purse, and I'm gonna explain some ways that you can use this pattern to create new ones. Like I mentioned before, this pattern is already fairly beginner friendly, but I'm gonna run you through a few things that you could do to simplify things even more. I use the heavyweight backing to help structure things, but in turn, it can make the sewing a little bit trickier. So if you're not comfortable using a heavyweight backing, you can always skip it, or you could just add some interfacing instead. I also do the piping to help add some structure, but this isn't required. So if you don't have a presser foot that allows you to do piping, you could always skip it. If it's just making the piping cord that intimidates you, you could always get store-bought piping as well. But regardless, I promise doing the piping is not as intimidating as it may seem. Lastly, the zipper lengths are a bit weird. Some of them are say 7 1/4 inch, which if you're setting up your own zipper like I am, that isn't an issue. But obviously you can't really find lengths like that online or in store. So if you wanted to, you could always change the zipper length from say 7 1/4 inch to 7 inches. Just remember, if you take that 1/4 inch off the zipper, you would need to add it onto the base strip as well then, so that the total length of the middle strip stays the same. Like I mentioned, the pattern comes with 5 different sizes. The circles increase a 1/2 inch in diameter between each size, and you'll notice that the middle strip length increases proportionally with those as well. So if you wanted to make one that was say a 1/2 inch bigger than A5, you would just increase the middle strip length by the same increment that it increased in all of the other ones. And you could use this same principle if you wanted to make one that was between some of the sizes that were already included. I hope this tutorial was easy to follow. I'm still fairly new at this and I'm learning as I go, so feel free to drop any questions you have in the comments and I'll do my best to help. If you want to see some more of my work, I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, and if you want more tutorials, make sure to subscribe here. I'm going to be trying to post at least once a month, and I'm also going to be doing giveaways for people that purchase my patterns and even people that just comment and subscribe on here. Have fun making your coin purse. This pattern has so much potential for customization. It really is a great add-on or standalone piece, so get creative with it. I can't wait to see what you guys make. I love y'all.